6:42 a.m. on August 17, 1942, Captain Paul Gunn crouched beneath the wing of a Douglas A-20 Havoc at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane, watching mechanics weld .50 caliber machine guns into the bomber's nose where the bombardier once sat. He was 43 years old, had spent 21 years in the Navy, and his wife and 4 children were trapped in a Japanese prison camp in Manila. The 5th Air Force was losing bombers faster than replacements could arrive. In July alone, the 3rd Attack Group had lost 11 A-20s attempting to strike Japanese convoys from high altitude. Bombardiers could not hit moving ships, and when crews flew lower, shipboard gunners tore the aircraft apart. Captain Ed Larner had watched 3 of his crews burn in the Coral Sea just a week earlier. Meanwhile, the Japanese were reinforcing New Guinea without opposition. Gunn had a different approach. If bombers flew low enough to skip bombs across the water like stones, they could strike ships at point-blank range. But first, they had to survive the run-in. That required overwhelming deck guns with massive forward firepower. It meant transforming bombers into strafers. The problem was straightforward. The A-20 Havoc carried 4.30 caliber machine guns in the nose, and .30 caliber rounds bounced off ship armor like hail. Gunn needed .50 caliber guns, 4 of them mounted where the bombardier had once been, firing straight ahead at a combined rate of 1,700 rounds per minute. General George Kenney, the new commander of the 5th Air Force, gave Gunn 1 week to prove the idea worked. Gunn scavenged .50 caliber guns from wrecked P-39 and P-40 fighters that would never fly again. The pilots were dead, the guns were not. He mounted them on a steel framework inside the nose compartment. Each gun weighed 64 pounds, and with 4 guns and 200 pounds of ammunition, the weight pushed the aircraft's center of gravity dangerously forward. The first test flight nearly killed the pilot. The A-20 barely climbed and constantly tried to pitch downward. Gunn spent 2 days rebalancing the aircraft, shifting equipment aft and adjusting the tail trim. The second test pilot said the plane flew like it was angry, but it flew. On September 12, 16 modified A-20s struck the Japanese airfield at Buna. The strafers came in at treetop height, guns pounding. They destroyed 14 Japanese aircraft on the ground and suppressed every anti-aircraft position. Not a single A-20 was lost. Kenney wanted more, but the A-20 had limitations. Its range was too short to reach Japanese bases across the Owen Stanley Mountains, and its bomb load was too light. Gunn needed a larger platform, the B-25 Mitchell. It offered longer range, heavier payload capacity, and more room for guns. In December, Gunn removed the bombardier and nose guns from a B-25C and installed 4.50 caliber guns in the nose, for more and external cheek packs on the fuselage, and rotated the top turret forward. 10 forward-firing guns. Then he added 2 more on each side, bringing the total to 14 guns and throwing 215 pounds of lead every second. The ground crews called it Pappy's Folly. If you want to see how Pappy's impossible gunship turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this one, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Pappy. Gunn flew the prototype to Charters Towers to demonstrate it to the 3rd Attack Group. The aircraft was nose-heavy and wanted to fall out of the sky on takeoff. He had to hold full back pressure on the stick just to keep it level, but once airborne, the B-25 became a flying destroyer. Kenney immediately ordered 12 more conversions. The 81st Air Depot Group in Townsville worked 18-hour days modifying every available B-25. By February 1943, they had 30 strafers ready for combat. Kenney then sent the blueprints to Wright Field in Ohio. Army Air Forces engineers studied the modifications for 3 days before replying to Australia. The changes were impractical, they said. The balance would be wrong. The aircraft would be too heavy. It would not fly properly. They recommended grounding every modified B-25 at once. Kenney was in Washington when the message arrived. He walked into General Hap Arnold's office, where the Wright Field engineers were waiting to explain why Pappy Gunn's gunship was impossible. Kenney told them that 12 of those impossible airplanes had just played the decisive role in destroying a Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. Every transport had been sunk, and 60 more strafers were already being converted in Australia. Arnold practically chased the engineers out of his office. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea began with intelligence intercepts on February 28, 1943. Allied codebreakers in Melbourne decrypted Japanese naval messages revealing that a convoy was departing Rabaul, 8 transport ships escorted by 8 destroyers, carrying nearly 7,000 Japanese troops bound for Laos on New Guinea's north coast. General Kenney had 72 hours to stop them. The convoy route crossed the Bismarck Sea between New Britain and New Guinea, more than 400 miles of open water. Japanese commanders believed bad weather would protect them. March was monsoon season, with low clouds, heavy rain, and poor visibility. Allied bombers could not hit targets they could not see. They were right about the weather, but wrong about the bombers. On March 2, reconnaissance aircraft spotted the convoy steaming south through the Vitiaz Strait. The 17 flying fortresses attacked from 15,000 feet through breaks in the cloud cover, dropping 137 bombs and claiming multiple hits. Post-battle analysis showed they sank nothing. High-altitude bombing against moving ships did not work. The convoy pressed on. That night, the ships dispersed. The transports hugged the New Guinea coastline while the destroyers formed a protective screen. Japanese commanders believed they would reach La by dawn on March 4, unload the troops under fighter cover, and turn the war in New Guinea in Japan's favor. They had no idea what awaited them at first light. Captain Ed Larner briefed the 92nd Bomb Squadron at Port Moresby on the evening of March 2. The strike force would include 12 B-25 Strafers, 30 modified A-20 Havocs, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters for top cover, and P-38 Lightnings to deal with Japanese Zeros. The Strafers would attack at mast height, just 50 feet above the water, firing at point-blank range. The plan was simple: overwhelm the deck guns with concentrated firepower, skip bombs into the ships while crews were stunned, and escape before the Zeros arrived. Larner had flown exactly one practice mission using this tactic. 1. When his navigator asked what would happen if a strafer was hit on the approach, Larner said they would find out tomorrow. The briefing ended at 2,200 hours. No one slept. At 6:30 on March 3, the strike force assembled over Cape Wardhunt, 137 aircraft in total. B-17s would attack first from altitude to draw defensive fire upward, and then the strafers would come in low. The Japanese convoy lay 70 miles northwest of La when the B-17s arrived. The heavy bombers attacked through scattered clouds, and the transports answered with every gun they had. The sky filled with black bursts of flak. One B-17 took damage and turned back, but the rest continued the attack. Then the strafers arrived. Larner led the B-25s in from the southeast at wavetop height, 14 forward-firing guns per aircraft, 168 guns across 12 strafers. They came in line of breast, a wall of firepower 300 yards wide. The Japanese crews on the transport Kyoku Simaru saw them at 2 miles. The ship's captain ordered, "Hard to starboard." Too late. The B-25s opened fire at 800 yards. The 50 caliber rounds walked across the water like a chainsaw. They hit the ship's superstructure, shredded the bridge, killed the anti-aircraft crews before they could traverse their guns. 3 B-25s dropped bombs at 100 yards. The first bomb skipped off the water, hit the hull below the waterline, detonated inside the engine room. The second bomb hit amidship. The third bomb missed. Kyuk was dead in the water 30 seconds after the strafers arrived. Burning, listing to port. The ship would sink in 40 minutes. And that was just the first transport. The transport Tio Maru tried to run. The captain pushed the engines to full speed, 15 knots maximum. The B-25 strafers were doing 240 knots. The math was simple. 4 strafers bracketed Tiyamaru from both sides. The 50 caliber streams converged on the deck. The anti-aircraft crews died at their guns. The bridge windows shattered. The ship's executive officer took 3 rounds through the chest. The captain lasted another 10 seconds before a burst cut him down. The strafers dropped 8 bombs total. 5 hit. The ship broke in half. Japanese soldiers were below decks when the hull split. Most never made it topside. The transport sank in 6 minutes. Survivors jumped into the Bismarck Sea wearing full combat gear. The packs dragged them under. Australian bow fighters strafed the decks of the destroyer Shikami as it tried to screen the transports. The destroyers anti-aircraft fire hit one bow fighter. The Australian pilot kept coming. His forward guns rad the destroyer's deck from bow to stern. The Japanese gun crews went down. When the B-25 strafers arrived, Shikami had no defense. 3 strafers attacked from different angles. The destroyer tried to turn into the attack. Too slow. Bombs hit port side, starboard side, and amidships. The destroyer didn't sink immediately, but it was finished. Dead in the water. Fires spreading. The crew abandoned ship. 2 hours later. By 0900 hours on March 3, the Japanese convoy was scattered across 40 square miles of ocean. 5 transports sinking or burning. 2 destroyers crippled. The remaining ships tried to make flay. They didn't make it. the strafers returned at 1,400 hours. Fresh bombs, full ammunition loads. The Japanese had no fighter cover. The Zeros had landed at Lely to refuel. They were on the ground when the second wave arrived. The transport Io Maru took 12 bomb hits in the second attack. The ship's magazine detonated. The explosion was visible from Port Moresby, 130 m away. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left. No wreckage, no survivors. 1,800 Japanese soldiers gone in 3 seconds. Captain Ed Strafer came in low over the transport Io Maru. His co-pilot counted 14 separate fires on the deck. Japanese soldiers were jumping overboard. The anti-aircraft guns were silent. Laner's bombardier released at point-blank range. 2 bombs, both hit. The transport settled by the stern and capsized. The modified A-20 Havocs hunted the crippled destroyers. The destroyer Asashio tried to rescue survivors from the water. 3 A-20s attacked from different directions. The destroyers' crew was focused on rescue operations. They never saw the strafers until the guns opened fire. Asashio took bomb hits on the forward deck and bridge. The destroyer burned through the night and sank at dawn on March 4. By the evening of March 3, the entire Japanese convoy was destroyed. 8 transports sunk. 4 destroyers sunk. Of the nearly 7,000 Japanese troops that left Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 reached Leh, 2,700 were rescued and returned to Rabaul. The rest died in the Bismarck Sea. Allied losses: 4 aircraft, 1 B-7, 3 P-38s, 13 air crew killed. General MacArthur called it one of the most complete and annihilating combats of all time. The Japanese never again attempted to reinforce New Guinea by convoy. The war in the Southwest Pacific had turned, and it turned because of Paul Gunn's impossible gunship. Back in Australia, the Wright Field engineers were drafting their formal report explaining why the B-25 modifications couldn't possibly work. Kenny sent a message to General Hap Arnold in Washington on March 5. The line read, "Commerce destroyer modifications approved for production." The body of the message contained one paragraph. 12 B-25 strafers had just destroyed an entire Japanese convoy. Request immediate factory integration of forward gun package into all B-25 production aircraft. Arnold called North American Aviation's President J.H. Dutch Kindleberger that afternoon. Kindleberger said his engineers needed to see the modifications. Arnold said he was sending the man who designed them. Paul Gunn was going to California. Gunn didn't want to leave Australia. His wife Polly and their 4 children were still in the Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila. The Japanese had held them since January 1942. 14 months. Gunn flew every mission hoping he'd get closer to liberating the Philippines. Going to California meant going in the wrong direction. Kenny made it in order. The 5th Air Force needed factory-built strafers, hundreds of them. Gunn was the only man who could show North American aviation how to do it right. The general promised Gunn would be back in the Pacific within 6 weeks. Gunn landed in Long Beach, California on March 27, 1943. The North American aviation plant covered 140 acres, 20,000 workers on 3 shifts. The assembly line produced 1 B-25 every 4 hours. The factory engineers studied Gunn's hand-drawn blueprints. They asked about stress calculations. Gunn said he didn't have any. They asked about wind tunnel testing. Gunn said he'd tested it by flying. They asked about the center of gravity problem. Gunn showed them where he'd moved the radio equipment aft to compensate. One engineer said the modifications would buckle the fuselage skin around the cheek gun mounts. The muzzle blast from the .50 caliber guns would peel the aluminum. Gunn said it. Then he showed them the blast tubes he'd welded to extend beyond the propeller arc. Problem solved. The factory engineers spent 2 weeks reverse engineering Gunn's field modifications into production drawings. They strengthened the nose structure. They redesigned the gun mounts. They added heavier gauge aluminum patches to reinforce the fuselage skin. They calculated the exact center of gravity shift and adjusted the tail trim accordingly. The first factory-built B-25G Strafer rolled off the assembly line on May 10, 1943. 450 caliber guns. In the solid nose, a 75mm M4 cannon in the forward fuselage.
The cannon used the same ammunition as the M3 Lee tank. One shell could hold a destroyer below the waterline. Gun test flew the prototype. The 75mm cannon recoiled 4 feet when fired. The entire aircraft shuddered. The navigator had to manually reload the cannon between shots. Rate of fire, 1 round every 30 seconds. Gunn told the engineers it would work for ships, maybe not for anything faster. North American Aviation built 400 B-25G strafers. Then they improved the design. The B-25H added 4 more 50 caliber guns in the cheek packs. 8 guns in the nose, 4 in the cheeks. 2 in the top turret rotated forward. 14 forward firing guns total. The H model kept the 75mm cannon but added a better recoil system. The navigator could reload faster. Rate of fire increased to 1 round every 20 seconds. The B-25J removed the 75mm cannon and added 4 more 50 caliber guns, 18 forward firing guns, the most heavily armed production bomber in history. North American Aviation built 4,900 B-25JS. They delivered the first ones to the Pacific in October 1943. Gunn returned to Australia in May. He'd been gone 6 weeks. Exactly. His family was still in Manila. The strafers kept hunting. In April 1943, B-25s destroyed 16 Japanese barges carrying troops and supplies near Finch Hafen. In May, they sank 12 cargo ships at Waiwak Harbor. In June, they hit the oil facilities at Balikpapan on Borneo. The Japanese stopped moving supplies by ship in daylight. It didn't help. The strafers learned to attack at night using radar. They learned to skip bomb from 50 feet in complete darkness. They learned to coordinate with PT boats that illuminated targets with searchlights. At the last second, the Japanese called the modified B-25s the Black Death. They weren't wrong. On November 2, 1943, Major Ben Fridge led 4 squadrons of strafers into Rabaul Harbor. 137 Allied aircraft total, 59 B-25s. The harbor held 38 Japanese vessels, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, cargo ships, minesweepers. The strafers came in at masthead height through phosphorus smoke that blinded the anti-aircraft gunners. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. The Japanese couldn't track them all. In 15 minutes, 30 ships were hit, 5 sunk outright, 12 damaged beyond repair, the rest limping. Rabaul Harbor was finished. As a forward supply base, Gunn flew that mission, have to fly combat. He was a Special Projects Officer headquarters staff, but his family was still in Manila and every mission took him closer. The intelligence reports from T.O. Tomas internment camp were getting worse. Food rations cut, medicine running out, prisoners dying from malnutrition and disease. The Japanese camp commander had informed the Red Cross that all prisoners would be executed if Allied forces approached Manila. Gunn told Kenny he wanted to fly the first mission over Manila when the liberation came. Kenny promised he could. The strafers evolved through 1944. Some carried 8.5 inches high-velocity rockets under the wings. Some carried napalm tanks. Some carried parafrag bombs, small fragmentation bombs with parachutes that allowed the B-25 to drop them from minimum altitude without catching itself in the blast. The most effective tactic was the combined strike. Heil B-24 Liberators would bomb from 20,000 feet to force the defenders to look up. Then the strafers would come in low. By the time the gunners looked down, the B-25s were already on them. In the first 8 months of 1944, 5th Air Force strafers destroyed 947 Japanese aircraft on the ground. They sank 273 ships. They killed an estimated 38,000 Japanese soldiers. The modified B-25s had become the decisive weapon in the Southwest Pacific Campaign. Gunn added his own modifications as the war progressed. He mounted additional fuel tanks to extend the range. He improved the gun cooling systems. He developed new ammunition loading techniques that increased the rate of fire. Some B-25s in the Pacific carried modifications that existed nowhere else because Gunn had invented them the night before a mission. Other theater commanders wanted strafers. Kenny sent them blueprints. The Mediterranean Theater modified B-25s for anti-shipping missions against German convoys supplying North Africa. The China-Burma-India Theater modified B-25s to attack Japanese supply lines along the Burma Road. The concept gun had proven in Brisbane spread across every combat zone. On October 20, 1944, American forces landed at Lein, the Philippines. The liberation of Manila was 3 months away. Gun's family had been in captivity for nearly 3 years. He was flying multiple missions every day now. He told his crew chief he wouldn't stop until his family was free. Then the Japanese bombed Tacubon airfield. The Japanese bombers hit Tacubon airfield on November 27, 1944 at 0330 hours. 56 aircraft, Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers escorted by 0 fighters. They came in low from the north. The radar operators saw them too late. Gun was in the operations tent reviewing mission plans for the morning strike when the first bombs hit. The tent was 200 yards from the main runway. Too close, the blast wave knocked him off his feet. Shrapnel tore through the canvas walls. A fragment hit Gun in the left leg. Another hit his shoulder. The medical officer found him trying to stand, blood soaking through his flight suit. Gun said he needed to check on his aircraft. The doctor said he needed surgery. Gun made it 30 feet before he collapsed. They evacuated him to the hospital at Lee. The leg wound was serious. The shrapnel had severed an artery. The surgeon said Gun wouldn't fly again for 6 months minimum, probably longer. The injuries qualified him for medical retirement. 45 years old, 26 years of service between the Navy and Army. He'd earned the right to go home. Gun told the surgeon he wasn't going anywhere until his family was free. The Battle of Manila started on February 3, 1945. American forces fought house to house through the city. The Japanese had declared Manila a fortress. They would defend every street. The fighting was brutal, building by building, block by block. Sto. Tomas internment camp was liberated on February 3, 3,700 Allied prisoners freed. Gun's wife Polly weighed 89 pounds. His daughter Julia weighed 63. They'd been eating rice and vegetable soup once a day for the past year. His son Nathaniel had malaria. His youngest daughter had dysentery, but they were alive. Gun flew to Manila on February 4 against medical orders. His leg was still bandaged. He was using a cane. The doctor had cleared him for light duty only. No combat flying. Gun went to Sto. Tomas instead. He found his family in the makeshift hospital the Army had set up. Polly didn't recognize him at first. He'd lost 40 pounds since she'd last seen him in April 1942. 3 years, he was completely gray. She thought he was a doctor. Then he said her name and she knew. The official Army report stated that Colonel Paul Eigen was reunited with his family on February 4, 1945 at Sto. Tomas internment camp, Manila. The reunion lasted 4 hours. Then Gun returned to Lee. His medical leave wasn't over, but the war wasn't either. The modified B-25s kept flying. Other pilots, other crews, but Gun's modifications. By the end of the war, North American Aviation had built 9,600 B-25 Mitchell bombers. Nearly 5,000 were Strafer variants with forward gun packages based on Gun's original design. Those Strafers sank over 800 Japanese ships in the Pacific. They destroyed over 2,000 Japanese aircraft on the ground. They killed an estimated 85,000 Japanese soldiers. The commerce destroyer concept that engineers had called impossible had become the most effective anti-shipping weapon in the theater. Gun never flew combat again. The leg wound ended his operational career. The Army retired him as a full colonel on June 30, 1948. Medical disability. He was 48 years old. He went back to the Philippines and rebuilt Philippine Airlines, the company he'd started before the war. Philippine Airlines resumed operations in 1946. Gun started with 3 war surplus C-47 transport aircraft. He flew routes between Manila, Cebu, Davao, and other Philippine cities. The airline he'd built with 5 Beechcraft planes before the war now operated across the entire archipelago. The Philippine government awarded him the Distinguished Service Star in 1947. President Manuel Rojos presented the medal personally.
The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism and exceptional service to the Republic of the Philippines during the Liberation Campaign, Colonel Gun's innovative modifications to Allied aircraft directly contributed to the defeat of Japanese forces and the freedom of the Filipino people." The United States military had already decorated him Distinguished Flying Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Air Medal, 9 Purple Hearts. The Distinguished Service Cross was recommended but never approved. Some officers believed Gun's contributions were technical rather than tactical. They were wrong. General Kenny wrote in his memoir, "Papy Gun was the most valuable man in the 5th Air Force. His mechanical genius and combat innovations changed the course of the war in the Southwest Pacific. Without his strafer modifications, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea would have been a Japanese victory. Without Bismarck Sea, we would have lost New Guinea. Without New Guinea, the road to the Philippines would have been impossible." MacArthur agreed. In a classified letter to the War Department dated July 1945, MacArthur recommended Gun for promotion to Brigadier General. The recommendation was denied. The Army Air Force was reducing force structure. Promotions were frozen. Gun remained a colonel. He never complained. He'd gotten what he fought for. His family was free. The Philippines were liberated. The Japanese had been defeated, and that was enough. Philippine Airlines expanded rapidly through the late 1940s and early 1950s. Gun acquired DC-3 aircraft, then DC-4s, followed by Convair 340s. The airline opened routes to Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Singapore, and by 1956, PAL was flying to San Francisco. What had begun as a small inter-island airline had grown into an international carrier. Gun flew constantly, Manila to Cebu, Cebu to Davao, Davao to Hong Kong. He could not slow down. The war had taught him that motion meant survival, and standing still meant death. Some of his pilots believed Gun was still fighting, still running from something, perhaps the memory of Santo Tomas, perhaps the faces of the men who had flown his modified aircraft and never returned. On October 10, 1957, Gun chartered a Beechcraft Model 18 twin-engine aircraft to fly from Manila to Baguio, a routine trip roughly 140 miles north. The weather forecast called for scattered thunderstorms over the Cordillera Mountains, nothing considered dangerous. He filed his flight plan at 0800 hours, scheduled departure at 0930, with an expected arrival at 1100. The tower cleared him for takeoff at 0928. The weather worsened far faster than predicted. 30. The Cordillera Mountains were completely socked in heavy rain, low visibility, severe turbulence. The Beechcraft's radio went silent at 10:47. Search and rescue teams located the wreckage 3 days later on a mountainside near Baguio. The aircraft had flown directly into a storm cell. The pilots attempted to climb above it, but powerful winds forced the plane into a ridge. The impact killed everyone instantly. Paul Irvin Gunn died on October 11, 1957. He was 57 years old, just 1 week short of his 58th birthday. The Philippine government honored him with a state funeral. 6,000 people attended, including American veterans, Philippine Airlines employees, and former prisoners from Santo Tomas. General Kenny sent a wreath from the United States. The Manila Times published Gunn's obituary on October 12 under the headline, "War Hero Dies in Plane Crash." The article noted his Distinguished Flying Cross, his role in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, and his liberation missions over the Philippines, but it could not fully capture what he had truly accomplished. The statistics told only part of the story: 5,000 B-25 strafers built using his modifications, 800 Japanese ships sunk, 2,000 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 85,000 enemy soldiers killed. Those were the official figures, but the real impact went far beyond numbers. The strafer concept transformed how air forces viewed bombers. Before Gun, bombers dropped ordnance from altitude. After Gun, bombers became multi-role weapons capable of strafing, skip bombing, and close air support. The AC-130 gunship used in Vietnam was a direct descendant of Gun's B-25 modifications, as was the A-10 Warthog and every modern attack aircraft equipped with forward-firing guns. North American Aviation hired Gun as a consulting engineer in 1948. He worked on the B-45 Tornado jet bomber, advised on gun mounting systems, and designed forward-firing armament packages. The company paid him well, and he donated most of the money to veterans organizations. His son, Nathaniel, joined the Air Force, flew B-52s in Vietnam, retired as a colonel, and later wrote a book about his father titled Pappy Gun. The book was published in 1994 and sold 12,000 copies. Even so, most people had never heard of Paul Gunn. The National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas, displays one of Gunn's original gun mounting drawings. The paper is yellowed, the measurements handwritten in pencil. The sketch shows 4.50 caliber guns mounted inside the nose of an A-20. There are no stress calculations, no computer models, just a simple drawing that helped kill 8,000 Japanese soldiers in the Bismarck Sea. In 2008, the Air Force Association inducted Gunn into the Air Force Enlisted Heritage Hall. The citation cited his innovations, his combat service, and his lasting influence on modern attack aviation. The ceremony was held in Washington, and 3 of his grandchildren were present. Philippine Airlines continues to operate today, flying to 42 destinations across Asia, Australia, and North America. At the company headquarters in Manila, a portrait of Gunn hangs in the main lobby. Most employees do not know who he is. If this story affected you the way it affected us, do us a favor and hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are recovering forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day, stories about mechanics who save thousands of lives with gun packages and field modifications, real people, real heroism. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or the Philippines? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring that Pappy Gun does not fade into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.